Parker Schnabel is no longer the one operating the backhoe. He was the youngest person to ever unearth millions of dollars from the frozen ground, and he was also the face of the gold rush. He is currently incarcerated following his severe punishment in a case that was among the most shocking environmental prosecutions in mine history. With his life sentence without the possibility of parole or an appeal, Schnabel's gold business has been halted. By the time he was 24 years old, this Parker had amassed over $13 million 0 cents in gold from his mining venture, which he had funded with the funds he had saved for college. Additionally, he made $24 million 0 cents in season 14 alone by turning dirt into TV gold. Now, though, his $16 million 0 cents from this year is on ice, and his assertions regarding Dominion Creek are under investigation. How did the most disciplined and diligent miner ever depicted on television go from hero to prison? That is the burning question on the minds of fans. As stress is nothing new for Parker Schnabel, even as a young boy he would play the gold game. At the age of 24, he had already discovered more than $13 million worth of gold. In just season 14, his squad earned $24 million 0 cents. He has every right to be pleased right now, what with the gold price increasing even further in season 15. Meanwhile, he's on the verge of experiencing a breakdown, a financial catastrophe, and now something even worse. In the middle of his pursuit of both ounces and memory, Parker made a decision that altered the course of events. The plot twists and turns, eventually leading to a courtroom confrontation. Before the season began, Parker settled on a single goal, 10,000 ounces. We set out to do that. At the present time, that amounts to over $26 million 0 cents in gold. It is significant, but he worked very hard to get there. Lots of work, good money, and no delays were what he needed. It was at that moment that he did something that caused people to take notice and then start ringing the bells. Gold Run and Sulphur Creek were two massive claims that he invested $2,500,000 0 cents in. These weren't meaningless patches of ground, they were historic sites and among the most valuable in the Klondike. Over the past century, they have produced gold with a value of $1,500,000,000 0 cents. However, the stripped ground, unstable ground, and unknown dangers made them dangerous. Parker acted without hesitation. He was determined to become the best, no matter what. In order for the new claims to be productive, Parker was forced to relocate Bob, his largest wash plant, from Ken and Stewart's claim to Sulphur Creek. He had never attempted a journey of this length before, covering 25 miles. They were given just 10 hours to complete it. Wow, it's insane how tight that is. However, it was almost successful. The mechanics swiftly repaired the damaged components, and Tyson Lee insisted on the final point. At long last, Bob was ready to go. To all appearances, everything was going swimmingly. The 290.05 oz of gold that Bob caught is valued at $766 0 cents in a matter of days. With an additional 276.01 ounces from Roxon at Elbow Cut, Parker's team exceeded $6 million. At that moment, taking that chance seemed like a smart move. But behind the scenes, time was of the essence. The further they dug at Bridgecut and Dominion Creek, the more issues they revealed. Big Red, Parker's primary gold wash plant, failed after 12 years and over $53 million 0 cents worth of gold. Everything came to a halt as soon as the tension bars snapped. Those 34,300 ounces were generated by that plant throughout the years. Suddenly it vanished. There was no space for error for Parker when Bob and Roxon were the only runners. Nothing worked out the way he had hoped. You didn't see the legal issues unfolding on television. Because he wanted to maximize his claims and collect as much money as possible before winter, Parker moved swiftly when making deals. In a private transaction that did not involve environmental review, he acquired adjacent claims. Concerns regarding permits, the potential disturbance of a protected waterway, and the presence of hidden fuel tanks arose at the earliest indication of trouble at Sulphur Creek. All of these questions lack definitive responses. You likely missed the initial warning signals, such as a tardy inspection or a visit from government officials who were unusually silent. However, red flags were visible. The warning signs became subpoenas as Parker increased his efforts, which included keeping the business open around the clock and transporting thousands of yards of gravel through protected areas. Then, the major shock hit. Parker is facing serious federal charges for allegedly breaking environmental laws on purpose. The illegal dredging, contamination of streams designated as national monuments, and inadequate waste management are all linked to the $2,500,000 0 cents property transaction. More missing paperwork, overridden permits, and worst of all, forged inspection reports signed by contractors claiming to work for Parker were discovered when the police dug deeper. All of a sudden, the show shifted its focus from ounces to proof. If Parker wanted to reach his 10,000-ounce target, prosecutors claim he knew he had to break the rules. Prosecutors claimed he endangered public safety and the environment by cutting corners and disregarded recommendations. The court records were quite alarming. 68 infractions were noted. Over $3,100,000, 0 cents in unauthorized site modifications were recorded, the soil surrounding the machinery was impacted, and more than 80 gallons of hydraulic fluid went missing. Parker's legal team attempted to slow down. They claimed that the workers had made a mess of things and that everything was wrong. Furthermore, they clarified that no one was attempting to violate the law and that the permits that were missing were simply the result of paperwork delays. However, things became complicated when the emails were presented in court. Parker encouraged constant output and assured his team not to be concerned about interference from agencies in an early season thread. The message both caught people's attention and continued to do so. With each recurrence, the courtroom grew noticeably quieter. The procedure continued. Parker knew exactly what he was doing, according to an ex-employee who quit midway through the season. He had been warned multiple times about the missing paperwork and potential violations, but he persisted anyhow. Suddenly, the focus shifted from arguing about blame to highlighting a leader who was under intense pressure to achieve the 10,000-ounce target. Bad things happened as a result. Environmental crimes, site damage, and other related issues were piled on top of each other like pay dirt. False inspection reports and careless excavation on public property were not isolated incidents. Rather, they were part of a pattern. Prosecutors referred to this pattern of behavior as willful disregard for the law. Things were already bad, but with the addition of blockage, they became unbearably bad, and my career would be over. Nothing was held back by the court. Sentencing guidelines that stunned onlookers were based on the claim that Parker's actions caused the greatest harm to the environment. However, there is a catch. Several news reports referred to it as a scandal, although that word failed to adequately describe the events depicted. The word prison was not uttered in public by anyone. No public humiliation or photo op aired. Parker, on the other hand, subtly and methodically disappeared from view. Word got around, someone said he was bringing up the topic of making up. Some claimed his detention was necessary for his own safety. Silence spoke volumes, though, because no one had a response. Among Parker Schnabel's 8 Discovery Channel spin-offs is Gold Rush Parker's Trail, which grossed $24 million 0 cents in its 14th season. By the time he was 24 years old, he had discovered over $13 million 0 cents in gold, having begun digging when he was still a young man. Right now, not even a whisper. The peculiar aspect? Parker preferred non-enthusiastic roles. As far as he was concerned, he was never famous. He lacked ostentatious residences and automobiles. He went so far as to admit that during his peak, he slept on a friend's couch in Los Angeles. Expensive trinkets weren't frittered away from him. On the contrary, he spent the money on experiences that would last a lifetime: vacations with his dad, shooting weekends with his pals, World Series tickets, and trips to Sin City. Money was never the issue. Loyalty and expertise were key factors. Right from the beginning, that was his thinking. He defied the odds and established a life for himself in the Alaskan wilderness. His grandma came along in 1937. Even now, his dad still starts his workday at 4:30. Regardless of how difficult things got, Parker's family and friends always persisted, worked through their pain, and ultimately triumphed. It was devastating to witness his downfall, because that was the essence of who he was. All summer long, he helped out around the house and had dinner with his grandpa every night, listening to tales that had been passed down through the years. He claims that, more than any piece of gold, it was that picture he wished he had recorded. Money disappears, and Parker has always known that. What mattered most was the legacy. There is a current threat to this past. It was supposed to be his breakout season in 2015 when he dominated the competition at $10,000. On the contrary, this season is being referred to as cursed. Everybody was out to get him. His tools stopped working, he had issues with permissions, and he was threatened with legal action on multiple occasions. Even with his best efforts, Parker was unable to complete the task at hand in the allotted time. When pressure became too great, something snapped. The future is completely unpredictable. Attorneys are reviewing his $16 million, 0 cents in earnings for the season. We are currently putting the claims on hold. Everyone is dispersed. Some are attempting to maintain composure, while others are remaining silent. With Parker removed from the center, though, everything feels different. Dominion Creek was the one thing on which Parker bet more than anything else. Instead of continuing to rent the land, he decided to buy it outright. That eliminated the need to pay any royalties or monthly fees. What this meant was that no one else could lose except him. Did he write that check? $1,500,000,000, 0 cents immediately. Only one payment is required, no return of funds, and that was only the start. Reason being, Dominion's gold wasn't lying around aimlessly. It was buried at a depth of over 40 feet. Getting there would be quite costly. Additional funds for equipment, fuel, labor, and time, the data suggested it was a good choice. Dominion possesses approximately 80,000 ounces of gold. That amounts to $160 million, 0 cents in idle capital at the current price of approximately $2, 0 cents per ounce. Parker saw potential in it beyond that of a mere mine. In 6 seasons, if he could pull 10, 0 ounces, he would reach his goal. The point was that such was the strategy. A snag, though, was present. His water rights and permits were only valid for another 6 years. Following that, assurances were non-existent. If the government did not renew the license, all the work done below ground would be for naught. Because this is something Parker does regularly, he risked it all. Throughout the claim's duration, his crew moved 25 million bank yards of dirt. That's over 4 million yards per season. And because it expands when transported, it's closer to 30 million yards. Doing so much work is discouraging and exhausting. Things break, employees get fatigued, and timelines get extended. The pressure is on everyone. This has far-reaching consequences. Tyson Lee, Mitch Blaschke, and everyone else felt it. They were pushed weekly because this wasn't a lease. Nobody was protected. Long wait times cost money. Parker would incur a loss of $1 for each ounce that could not be recovered. With the whole operation riding on his ability to remain ahead of schedule, Parker could not afford to fail after that check, and with that deadline. 10,000 ounces annually, regardless of circumstance. Step back in time for a second. Being cautious did not lead to Parker's success. When he initially gained fame in 2010 on Gold Rush, Alaska, Nobody could have been more certain. Although the other miners were out buying trucks and toys, Parker was hard at work on the ground plan and team. Before he turned 24 years old, he had amassed $13 million, 0 cents in gold. By season 14, he had won $24 million, 0 cents, and the show had followed him to Guyana, the Klondike, Oregon, and Colorado. Above all else, he battled, but he also worked hard and planned. However, season 15 marked a shift. Both the game and the amount of stress were altered by Dominion. According to Parker, the loss of his crew, the individuals who had been by his side from the start, was more terrifying than the cost itself. He'd prefer to part with them than pocket the cash. As a result, he resolved to expand rather than contract, pivot, or abandon ship. With the help of metallic minerals, he was able to acquire additional land, expand his business, and secure a 12-kilometer section of Australia Creek for mining exclusively. In addition to royalties for each ounce extracted, that deal necessitated a minimum annual payment of $1 million, 0 cents. Not only did he have command of Dominion, but Little Flake Mining had given him a whole new location to oversee as well. The crew's adaptability became crucial as the scale grew at that rate. He didn't need emotionally fragile people in his life, as Parker put it himself. Those who were unable to maintain the pace were expelled, certainly not a justification. Second chances do not exist. With a long-term prize of $200 million, 0 cents on the line, the stakes were higher than ever. However, things didn't remain easy. Why? Because the likelihood of making a mistake decreased as the scope of the project expanded. Each malfunctioning wash plant, weather delay, and unmet ounce of extra contributed to the total. Relationships started to feel the effects of the stress at that point. During that season, Parker had few encounters with Rick Ness. They barely collided with one another. All summer long, Parker had no face-to-face interactions with Rick. In front of the camera, they had a lengthy conversation about Rick's difficult situation. Additionally, they ran in separate directions. Tony Beats is no different. Parker, in the distant past, the topic of permits, land, and profits was just one of many that Tony and I debated. However, this time they were more circumspect. In between sets, just a couple of casual coffees, Parker was no longer obligated to pay Tony any money. He wasn't dispersing income checks and had the land rights. There would be less fighting, but less getting along as a result, and there was a cost to being disconnected. As the pressures of Dominion mounted, there was little outside assistance. Parker struggled mightily to stay up, but he was unable to move. On the other hand, he was still honoring his formal commitments. A 400-hole drill program remained in his sights as he finalized a major deal with Metallic. His company was sued in 2023, barely 2 years after he received the Robert E. Leckie Award for Environmental Stewardship from the Yukon government in 2022. Things can change in the mining industry in an instant. You might be the center of attention one season and the recipients of accolades the next. Quiet, mobile, and firmly planted. That was Parker throughout the day, just as he was while working. He did not own a home, nor does he often fly around in a private plane for parties. People would let him stay with them for weeks at a time, whether it was in Mexico, the Bahamas, or Los Angeles. Through the winter, he can be found riding kiteboards, snowmobiles, and snow bikes, when they all stay in working order, of course. He's understated. He was destined to wiggle and push. Perhaps that contributes to the issue. Not in a high-rise boardroom, but 40 feet below at Dominion Creek, where a single poor decision could derail the entire season. Parker reinvests the $13 million, 0 cents he made by the age of 24, while everyone else is perplexed by how a young man in his 20s could amass such a fortune. For 2024, Parker's net worth is projected to reach $8 million, 0 cents. There were others who estimated a figure closer to $10 million, 0 cents. Even though he has been the lead of a hit Discovery Channel series for more than a decade, nobody saw that coming. That much money wouldn't buy him a watch. Rare cars aren't kept by him. The general consensus is that he is the sole owner of a modest cabin on private property adjacent to a tranquil lake in Haines, Alaska. I don't think that's very Hollywood. Its wood frame and metal roof make up its 2,000 square feet of living space, which was constructed in 2015. Which part of it surprises you the most? There was talk that he bought a $950,000 zero-cents mansion. Parker denied it categorically. He claimed he was without a place to sleep and preferred to stay in friends' homes. To the average person, that makes no sense, but to Parker it does. This is the identical individual who gambled away his college fund. He was selecting rock shapes and obtaining permits when most teenagers were choosing dorm rooms. This wasn't his first $17 million zero-cents wager on Dominion Creek. Simply said, it was the largest, riskiest, and most famous. The search for gold was arduous. The frozen ground was 40 feet below. He would need to shift 30 million cubic yards of dirt over the course of 6 years for it to be viable. On the tools and the operators, that's over 5 million yards per year, non-stop. Dominion was no ordinary mine. It was a gold-loving monster, and no one was prepared to tame it except Parker. Despite the record-high price of gold, he continued moving at a rapid pace. He made the most of his situation by increasing his workforce and stockpiling equipment. He consented to excavate Australia Creek so that metallic minerals could pay him royalties. He committed to working for $1 million, 0 cents per year, and paid taxes in advance. He was building a gold kingdom, not merely mining for it. Even in Yukon, the labor was far from done. His travels took him all over the world, including Brazil, Guyana, Papua New Guinea, Alaska, and Australia, from the mountains to the rainforests, and from the Klondike to the bush. Contrary to what other teams did, Parker kept playing throughout the winter. In the midst of filming Parker's trail, he endured bugs, mudslides, altitude sickness, and the prospect of more riches in a region where few dared to venture, all while juggling details in languages he didn't speak. Once, while in the Andes, at 16,000 feet, he became ill. He blacked out from the extreme high, but he persisted anyhow, and the camera didn't budge. After factoring in Gold Rush, Parker's Trail, streaming rights, merchandise deals, advertising, and $2.50 per show, the total cost became apparent. His annual income from mining, television, and licenses reportedly exceeds $4 million, 0 cents, according to some news sources. Every performance brings in $10,000, 0 cents to $25, 0 cents for him and his crew. You could say it's a moneymaker. Parker wasn't genuinely interested in the money, though. Despite the millions, shows, and people watching from all over the mining world, he aspired to win and meet his grandfather's expectations. Schnabel said, in addition to protecting his crew, he wanted to prove that an ordinary man from an Alaskan town could compete and win the world's most difficult business. This is why it is more powerful than anybody anticipated. That's because we're talking about Parker Schnabel here, the tenacious young man who endured a muddy childhood but eventually built a successful business with nothing more than a shovel and some loyal customers. No one is prepared for the shock that fans, investors, miners, and everyone else feels when they see everything come to a halt, even if only temporarily. Nothing has happened yet. His $16 million, 0 cents, from this season has been halted. Lawyers are reviewing his claims at Dominion. His income sites have gone silent, and who knows what the future holds. Season 15 of Discovery continues to feature the major issue that no one wants to discuss. Nobody is saying it, but everyone can feel it.